Thousands of years ago, in the shadow of a dying fire, a Neanderthal reached out, not with a weapon, not in hunger, but with an offering, a piece of meat shared with a stranger. No words exchanged, no promise of repayment, just kindness. We think of history as a chronicle of wars, kings, and conquests, but hidden beneath the dust of empires lies something far more powerful, something so simple it's often forgotten. Kindness, not as weakness, not as naivety, but as the quiet force that shaped civilizations, saved lives, and, in some cases, changed the fate of nations. The oldest recorded act of kindness? A Mesopotamian tablet from 2500 BCE, not a decree from a king, but a humble merchant's ledger. It lists not debts, but gifts. Food given to the starving during a famine. No interest, no demand, just 3 words etched into clay, because they needed it. Why does this matter? Because in a world where survival was everything, kindness was the first currency, the unspoken rule that bound tribes into villages, villages into cities, and yet we rarely speak of it. Take the Battle of Corinth, 146 BCE. Rome burned the city to the ground, but in the ashes, a Roman centurion was seen carrying a wounded Greek child to safety. When questioned, he simply said, "Because today I am human first." Kindness is not a modern invention. It is not a luxury. It is the oldest language we know. One that predates writing, that outlives empires. And yet, how quickly we forget. 30,000 years ago, in the heart of the last ice age, a hunter stood at the edge of survival. His spear was broken, his stomach empty, and then he heard it, a child's cry, lost in the blizzard. He had a choice: walk away, save himself, or share his last strips of dried meat with a stranger. That single decision may have saved not just a life, but the future of humanity itself. Modern science tells us something astonishing. We are wired for kindness. Hidden in our very genes is an ancient truth. Empathy wasn't just moral, it was survival. When early humans left Africa, they faced impossible odds. Predators, starvation, a world of ice. Yet they thrived, not because they were the strongest, but because they were the kindest. Archaeologists have found Neanderthal bones healed from brutal injuries. How? Someone fed them, protected them, carried them for months. This wasn't just compassion, it was strategy. Because in a world where every day was a battle, kindness was the ultimate weapon. Tribes that shared food during famine, they outlasted those who hoarded. Warriors who spared enemies, they gained allies instead of endless wars. Take Çatalhöyük, 7,500 BCE. No palaces, no temples, just homes so close you could step from rooftop to rooftop. And inside those walls, no signs of war, no mass graves, just evidence of care. The sick were fed, the elderly honored. For 2,000 years, this city flourished on one radical idea: we survived together. We like to think civilization was built by conquerors, but the truth? The first cities weren't won by swords. They were built by hands that helped, shared, and healed. 1780 BCE. The Code of Hammurabi is carved into stone, an eye for an eye echoing through the ages. But buried beneath these famous laws lies something extraordinary, the very first legal requirement to be kind. Law number 23. If a man cannot pay his debts, you shall not take his field. If he has nothing, you shall give him grain, so he may live. Not a suggestion, not charity. The law. Across the ancient world, from Babylon to Athens, kindness wasn't optional, it was mandatory. The Egyptian Book of the Dead demanded the deceased testify, "I gave bread to the hungry, water to the thirsty." The Mauryan Empire punished officials who failed to help the disabled. But why? Why would ruthless emperors and warrior kings enshrine compassion in stone? Because they understood a terrifying truth. Societies that abandon kindness die. Look at Rome's final days. As wealth concentrated in fewer hands, as the poor starved in streets lined with golden statues, the empire's heart stopped beating. The historian Ammianus Marcellinus wrote, "The nobles would rather burn their grain than give it to the plebs." Within generations, Rome fell. The ancients knew what we've forgotten. Kindness isn't weakness. It's the ultimate social contract, the glue that holds civilizations together. And when that glue fails, 1347, the Black Death sweeps across Europe. In Marseille, a ship drifts into harbor, its crew dead or dying. The The dock's empty, doors lock, but in the shadows, a figure moves toward the ship. His name was lost, his story nearly forgotten. Just another Franciscan monk who chose to walk into hell because someone had to. This was the greatest catastrophe in human history. Half of Europe would perish. But in the ruins, something extraordinary happened. The survivors wrote of strangers nursing the sick, of thieves returning stolen gold to the dead, of Jewish doctors treating Christian patients despite the pogroms raging outside. Today, I buried my children. Tomorrow, I will bake bread for orphans who are not mine. These words weren't written by a saint, just a cloth merchant from Siena who couldn't bear to let the world end in darkness. The church called it Memento Mori, remember you must die. But the people, they lived by an older creed. Remember you must live, and therefore you must care. We think of the Dark Ages as, well, dark, but dig through the records and you'll find thousands of small, impossible acts. A Venetian merchant turning his palazzo into a hospice. English peasants leaving food at the edge of infected villages. Why? Not for salvation, not for reward. Because when all other systems fail, kindness remains the last language we understand. 1585, the height of France's religious wars. A Huguenot child hides in a Catholic priest's attic. Outside, mobs chant for blood, but beneath the city, an invisible network stirs. A chain of safe houses, forged in silent defiance. This wasn't unique. From the Jewish escape tunnels of Roman Cologne to the Quaker stations of the Underground Railroad, history's darkest chapters always had counterweights. When Baghdad's House of Wisdom burned, scholars smuggled manuscripts out in their robes. For 400 years, these texts survived in mountain monasteries because librarians risked death to save not books, but the light inside them. In places where kindness was outlawed, it didn't disappear, it went underground. The Kakuri Kirishitan, hidden Christians, passed Bibles disguised as Buddhist sutras. Dutch merchants hid Jews in spice barrels. Not for profit, not for fame, because some lines must never be crossed. We remember the tyrants, but who remembers the neighbors who lied to the SS? The nuns who forged baptismal certificates? The Berlin factory workers who accidentally made faulty bullets? These weren't saints. They were teachers, farmers, housewives, people who simply recognized a truth. Civilization isn't built in grand gestures, but in countless small refusals to accept that cruelty is normal. This survived the rise and fall of 10 empires, wars, plagues, the turning of ages, and now we walk past it every day without seeing. We live in the most connected era in history, yet the CDC warns loneliness is deadlier than obesity. Our ancestors built cities on mutual aid. We've engineered societies where you can die surrounded by people and never be seen. But remember, when COVID lockdowns began, Italians sang from balconies. In Delhi, Sikh temples fed millions despite empty coffers. In every disaster, the pattern repeats. First panic, then something ancient wakes up. This isn't naivety, it's our evolutionary superpower. Neuroscientists found that helping others triggers the same primal reward pathways that kept our ancestors cooperating through ice ages. Kindness isn't just nice, it's coded into our survival blueprint. 12,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers hauled 16-ton stones across mountains to build this temple. Not for shelter, not for storage, to gather, to share, to say, we are more than our hunger. The choice before us isn't complicated. Every day, in ways so small we barely notice, we vote for what kind of ancestors we'll be. The Assyrians left pyramids of skulls. The Minoans left frescoes of dancers. What will we leave?